All right, let's talk about spline modeling and using splines to get your base form. This is just another example of using a different type of tool to get the same kind of results we want. The final results we're looking for is for us to, again, have a simple form that we can start box modeling out of. I mean, if I take a cylinder real quick and I do this, and I pull it up, and let's say I'm making a handle for a sword. Got a front view. Oops, I did that wrong. So again, go to the top view, cylinder up, cylinder up. Go to the front. I'll thin it out. Let's say 0.25 for the width. One's pretty tall, so let's just say 1 for now. We'll even do 0.1. I mean, these are meters, so they're going to be big. And then we say, I want to, at this point, what I've been showing you is you don't need any of this other stuff. You just need the amount of cuts you want on it. And like, I think the last one we worked with was 12 for a test. So if we look at this, we collapse it down to a noble poly. If I wanted to make this like a handle with straps on it, how would I do that? I mean, there's always 2 or 3 ways to do it. You know, if you're with me, you could do it one way, and if you do the way I do it, I mean with me, but if you do it the way I do it one way. But let me show you a different way real quick. I'm going to grab all these edges. I'm going to divide them. I don't want to use Swift Loop. This way I can get them all even, and I'll divide them, well, I don't know. Let's say that many. And then I'm going to take 4 to go to poly mode. Grab all of these. Now I'm going to have to do it a little bit different. I'm going to grab every other one of these like this. Then I'm going to extrude. Then I'm going to say along a local normal. I'm going to pull this back in, and actually let's do bevel instead. I always say extrude, but I mean bevel. Again, same problem. Very cool looking if you're making a gear, I guess. Pull this in way much. Oh, that's pretty good there actually. Let's pull this in just a little bit here. We'll pull this out a little bit. This. Okay. I can take these. It looks like I missed one. You don't want to do the 2 next to each other, because if I do the 2 next to each other, I'll show you. So it's automatically going to keep that, but if I grab the 2 next to each other, it's going to grab them both as one. So I have to do this a couple times, so I'll just take that and do this last one. And then if I turn off, you know, I've got a handle. Again, there's 100 ways to do the same thing. If you know this is the width you want it to be, let's go back to here, look at this. I'll go to 2, go to edge mode, grab all those edges, and cheap way of doing it, and I think this is closer to how I did it. Oh, that's the wrong button. Closer to how I did it in the test. I just used a chamfer. Don't even do that. Goodness gracious, my brain. All right, there we go. We're going to use a extrude. I'm going to pull it in a little bit, and then I'm going to pull the width out. So I've got that. Pretty close to the same thing. Or we could do it the other way that I do stuff, and this way it would make the edges a little bit less even, because I'd have to eyeball it. But from the front, I would extrude it in. If you look what I did there, I'm going to extrude it in about that much. I could pull it up a little bit, and then I extrude it back out. I could pull it up a little bit, and now I, get the same thing. Just have to eyeball it. So extrude, and if I'm smart, I can look down here and make sure that I'm doing the same amount every time. So 80, we'll call it 85% or 85 units. Pull it up a little bit. If we're paying attention again, we could do the same thing. I mean, but the point about doing it this way is that you're going to take more time watching your numbers than you're actually going to have to building. Look at this. I forgot to go up on the last one last time, and then you're going to have mistakes. So these ways are a little bit faster. Well, there's another way too, and there's some tools we really haven't talked about, just because they don't come into my brain very often. There are definitely times when they're useful. Those are the times that I use them. So let me make sure you understand what they are. We've talked about polys as they're built. Let's talk about splines and lines. What these are actually called line shapes, right? These are all shapes. This is the shape menu. But we're going to look at it, and we're going to make these lines, and they're actually called splines. These are put it this way, they're edges and verts, but they never connect, so therefore we never make a full polygon. So if I take this and oops, I gotta get in the front view here. Delete that. Front. If I click and drag, just click, not click and drag, but click and drag to the next one, single clicks. And then I close this. It makes a closed spline shape. Now, what does that mean? It means this isn't. This is a wire. This is not the wireframe mode. You can see that I'm in full default shader, and if I rotate it, you'll see that there's just no form to it. That's because at this point we haven't really told it to draw polygons. We're just telling it to draw the edges. So what's the point of using this? Well, I mean, you can extrude it, for example. I could take an extrusion modifier on it, and if you want this kind of funny shape and you don't want to model it from a plain form, you could do an extrusion like this, and then say how much you want to extrude it, and now you've got this shape. Now, I don't generally like using these because it makes edges, first off, and I'll show you how to get rid of those, some of those, and then it makes your cap just a plane. So you're going to have to come in here and cut this up the way you want. But let's talk about what it's done here. Oh, I'll come back to this. Now, since it's a modifier that we just extruded, if we can go back down in the stack, excuse me, and look at what we have here. If we go to the verts of this, you'll see it doesn't look like there's any cuts. When I look at the final one, there's cuts. So what's going on? How is that possible? Well, okay, see this little curve right here? That is making me divide this thing up. So if I look inside the interpolation, it'll say 6. So we'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it divides it 6 times between the two edges. Makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 actual polygons out of it. But so it's interpolating it 6 times. You'll see this side's the same thing over here. Why? But I still don't see the verts that it's making those cuts from. It's because if you have any kind of curve on this stuff, it's going to try and use the default 6 divisions to make that curve smooth. Now, how did I get a curve? Well, I dragged this when I created this first spline here. If I click and then let go and then click and then let go and then click and let go, I just get straight points. But if I just happen to click and then drag at the same time, all of a sudden I get these little curves. And this may be what you want, this may not be what you want. But because there's that many curves, because it's deciding to curve this out, when it made it, it interpolated this curve by six divisions. Well, I don't see a curve here. Well, there is. There's a little bitty curve right there. I just have this little curve. And if you look at the original object, it's just barely a curve. You can barely see it. But let me show you something. If I turn those interpolations up or down, it divides this up more, or it divides it down more. So if you want to get rid of some of these edges that you don't mean to have or don't mean to be there, there's a couple things you can do. You can come back into the edge mode, look at the vertices, and once I select that vert, like if I select this vert, there's nothing to it. If I select this vert, it's got these handlebars that do this. Well, what are those? These are called Bezier handlebars. It's the math that interpolates the curve here. So if I don't want this, I can either turn down the amount of divisions it has, or come to the right click menu, which is how we control what kind of vertices it's going to vertex it's drawing. So if I change this to corner, for example, bam, no more edges. Okay, it's just about the way I drew it out, and it's just about little drag and click when I meant to click and then drag, as it were. So that's splines, and I'm going to go over a few of them. I just wanted you to understand that this is the reason you would use it. Again, we're just trying to get back to where we were. Where we want to be is to have an editable poly that we can control, and then we cut up and divide the way we want. So even if I make the form this way, it's never going to be finished. It's just the starting point. So some people like to use splines for that stuff, and I wanted to make sure you understood them. So let me show you another example. If I go to the front viewport, it's another reason I'm not crazy about these things, because you're building in the front viewport's a little bit cleaner. And I take this, and I hold shift, by the way, and it'll snap it. And then I click, and then I click down, and then I click over, and then I click down, and then I click over, and then I click down, and I click over, and I click down, and I click over, and you get the idea. I keep clicking down and over. I can count how many moves this is, probably the best way example. Let's do one more. There we go. Then I come back to the middle. You can kind of see a form there. Now, if I'm ready to work on this spline after I've made it, all I need to do is go back to the modify menu, go to the vertice mode, and look at this stuff. Now, I'd love for these to be evenly laid out, but they aren't, so I'm just going to move them by hand real quick. I could try and scale them in, but it'll be easier to fix their easiness or their evenness inside of the 3D model instead of this. Like this one, how far back it is. I mean, I could take all of these verts and I could go to the scale menu, scale, and then turn this off so it's only doing one, and then scale them all into one position. Sure. Or I could just click a button later and make sure I'm exactly right, because I could still be off by, you know, milliparts here, little tiny bits. Anyway, so this, if you want to look at it, is like a lathe. And let me show you what a lathe looks like real quick. Open this up, go plus, let's say lathe. All right, images. If you remember your woodworking shop, the idea is you put a piece of wood inside of here, and it rotates it around and around and around, and then you carve out a piece of wood to make it look like let's say a table leg. That's what it shows. So part of this they didn't. There you go. Let's see, that's what it looks like. This piece of wood is spinning and spinning, and they just carve on it. Now it's the same kind of thing you would do for metal too, but it's just not the way we think of it. It's the easiest way to describe it is this way. See if there's a video. Maybe that's even better description. There you go. I don't know if we really want to hear this guy, but I'm not even sure. Oh, I know why. I think I turned off my audio here. See, all he's doing is going in, and you get the shape by having flat tools, you know, and he's just, for this curved edge, he's just going slowly across that right there. Okay, so that's a lathe. And because the reason I told you that there's a purpose is because if we go inside of our modifier menu and we look inside of here, we come down to L for lathe, you'll see the first thing you get is lathe. So it's going to rotate itself around the center of the object by default, and that's probably not what we're looking for, but we get a way to make a 3D object. So instead of saying center, usually I say max, because that's going to go to the outside edge. So if we look at a max, it's this here. This is the max, this is the min, this is the center. So if I look at it and I say max, it goes out all the way. So it's doubling the width. So if I basically did this, yeah, let me do something here, get rid of the lathe. If I do this, more time here, good measure, doesn't matter which way I go, there. If I do this, move it over here in the center, and then I take this first one again, and I say lathe, I go max, you'll see it matches perfectly, because it's going to take the furthest point out and use that as the center point of a lathe, like when it's rotating around that with the wood block. So that's a lathe, and that's what we use those for. Like if I was going to make that wood table leg like he was showing, and when I want to use this lathe tool type of deal, I would come into here, go to the line. Let me get rid of this one actually. Delete. All right. Come in here, get rid of go back to the line. And since I've got it all straight at this point, I'm going to actually grab these and yeah. I could take this. You know what? I'm going to do, yeah. I could take one of these verts, turn it to a smooth. Let's see, smooth's not the best in the world, so I'm going to go Bezier, so I can control that handle. Move it to here, Bezier, move it to here, rotate it Probably want to change the interpretation to 6 like we had before. Now, when you're moving these handlebars, whatever your last move was with this move tool gizmo is the way it's going to move. So if I want to make it move in two directions, I need to grab that. Now it'll move in 2 directions. So I grab it in this and then move it. You'll see that I can't make it go right and left because that hasn't been the last one selected. All right, so I get something like that. Move it to the middle maybe. And now if I look at the lathe, it's this round piece. So I mean, it's kind of the reason they call it a lathe. Inside of other programs like Maya, they call it revolve. But it's the same thing. Oops. So I'm going to grab this, go back to front, grab this edge here, and drag it out a little bit, and we get something, you know. So you can see that there's some cool stuff to it, but the problem is, and this is the deal, that if I go back to 1, the problem is it gives you all these subdivisions. That's not necessarily bad as long as you turn this down to 1, okay, maybe even 0, okay. At least then your subdivisions aren't eating away. But if you try and make this smooth here, you're going to get a beautifully smooth thing, but you're going to have so many edges. Let's say even 10. That's a lot of edges. There's no reason for that many edges, especially when it's going to be a table leg or something. So anyway, so you can make some really cool stuff out of this. I mean, you can also do other things with splines. Like if I take this line right here and I go to the top and I'll delete this one right here. And I do some pre-made shapes like a circle. Okay. Actually, let's do an ellipse. Ellipse is a non-perfect circle, so it's in an oval position here. If I move this over, and I can take things like another, let's do a rectangle, and I'll make a rectangle, but I'm going to do it from the front. Okay. I'm going to move it over. I'm going to rotate it. This TZ, get it kind of straight here. There we go. So it's a straight piece right there. It's on there. Now I can take this one and come over to, instead of the modify menu, I'll go down in the drop down and go to compound objects or compound shapes. Oops, compound objects. You have to go back to the modify, go to compound objects. Then you're going to loft. And what a loft does is it'll take one shape and use the other shape to define its form. So you'll see if I look here, it says path and shape. Okay, so I'll get, I have the path, which is the circle I want, and then I'm going to get the shape. So I'll click on the shape, and now I've got that right there. Again, all this is a torus that's defined a little bit funny, and you still want to cut it in half and do all the other stuff to it. And you know, look at this, it's divided it for you, and you do have controls over that. If I come back to the modify panel, surface parameters, I can say, where's it actually? I guess it's skin parameters. Change this to 2, and it's going to have 2 or 1 or 0. So it does a perfect like that. I can also say the shapes, again, between them is 5. If I turn this down or up, there's the actual points. Now remember what we're looking at is this object, its shape. So this edge right here. So because it's got interpolation on it, meaning that it's dividing it up, it divided that piece up originally. So if I turn this back to 6, 3 or whatever, it divides it that way. So I mean, it's got its uses. It's useful in some ways. In some things it's really fast to get through. In some ways I almost don't use, I mean, I rarely use it. There's times like I made for the other class we did this. Let me show you. I'm going to delete this, go to front, take this, edit this piece right here, go to the left, I guess. And if you want to make a division inside of a object or a rectangle, you come inside of here, you turn it actually by default. You can't mess with the basic rectangle. So you can either turn it to an editable spline and add verts, or you can like multiply this and do what's called Boolean. So right now I'm going to do something like this just to make it simple. And then I'm going to say grab the original, turn it into an editable poly again, spline, I mean, again. And inside the spline, I'm going to say go to the different modes. So there's vertex mode, there's edge mode, and then there's whole spline mode. So in here, I can tell it to go Boolean, which means I can add these two together. So if I click on Boolean and then I click on, actually they have to be added together first. So attach this to this. So now I have these two shapes that are working together as one. If I say Boolean and I use this button right here, union, it's going to, let me grab this one first, go Boolean and then click on this one. It'll add those two together like one shape. Okay, so that's cool, complex shapes. If I take this one, which is subtract, and add those two together, by saying Boolean, he does that. And then the last one is intersect, so it'll just be the one in the middle. So I'll say Boolean, oops, no, I'll come over here and say Boolean, and then click on this one, and now I've just got the intersection. So I mean, it's got its uses, I guess. Again, I'm not sure that I couldn't just make this shape really simply inside of the poly modeling tools, but anyway, what we did in the other class was when you have an extra edge right here and you want to make more vertices, you can do it the way I was just showing you, add more pieces, or you can just click on refine, and it makes more edges for you. So I'm going to take these two, pull it out, change them to corners, all of them. That way I don't have any interpolation. And then I'm going to pull this one up, go to the front view or left view. Make it straight. I could grab both of them. And again, scale in one direction. Looks pretty good. So we made a stadium edge here, or an arena. I take these two and say corner. And then all I'm doing when I do that is grabbing an edge and telling it how I want it to be defined. And the corner means there's never going to be any interpolation. It's going to be one vert to the next vert. As soon as you say Bezier or smooth, it starts doing the crazy stuff, or Bezier corner. So I guess I'll show you that real quick. Bezier is this, where I have that, you know, again, I only have that selected there, where I have that. It's another reason I'm not crazy about them is the tool sets are kind of funky. I could do that with it. Bezier corner, on the other hand, lets each of these act individually. So I could have a curve on one side and a sharpness on the other. The other option is smooth, which means it defines it for you, or of course going back to corner. And generally speaking, I just grab everything and say corner just to get it out of the way. So there's no extra edges that it's creating for me. If I want to make those edges, I can do them on my own in most cases. I mean, if I want to have fun, I can do that, but let's see. So I think what we did is we added Boolean shapes to this, meaning adding more shapes to make this form. But again, I'm all about the fastest solution, so I can grab one here. I'm going to just put a few dots here just so I'm breaking it up. I'm going to pull this. Let me see how I'm going to do this. Pull this out. Pull this one up. Actually, I'll pull it down. Pull this over. No. I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to make another vert right here. I'm going to grab that one, pull it up, pull it over, make another vert here. Oh, I don't need that one actually. Just pull this one straight up. Basically, I wanted a little area in the middle there, so I was just trying to figure out how to do that without bullying it, because usually you could just cut out, the actual exercise was to use several shapes and cut them out. And again, yes, these tools are all in here. Yes, they have their uses. Yes, they're cool. I think you can use them for definitely a lot of different things. I'm just back to the point where how do I get to the easiest editable poly shape as possible? They're absolutely masters of working in splines, and they can get what they want. But the basic idea to me is the most logical solution is how do you get to the form of an editable poly? So let me show you this. I'm going to come in here and say ellipse, and then I'll go to create, make sure I'm in compound mode, which is under standard primitives. And then I say loft, and I pick the shape, and I click on this one. And now I've got, you know, this really exaggerated, but this is how we would have done an arena, right? And again, the cool thing is you can come back in here and edit and mess it up however you want. Add divisions, whatever you want to do. But I'm not defining, I just didn't want you not to have a chance to see these tools inside of here. I don't really want you to take the time to master them for my needs, for the class's needs. But if you want to, they're here. And if it's something easier for you to work with, I am all about it. There are definitely teachers who like to use splines, and there's nothing wrong with that. We used it to do some complex shapes. It just means you're doing a lot more setup instead of a lot more building. Again, not a problem. I think that when we did the edges, or when we did the lofting here, delete the loft again. I think when I did it, I think we did it, let me see, top 0. I just want to show you that you can use them just like you would anything else. That was my point, is that it gets to how do you get to the shape you want more about than how do you use these things. Meaning that the shapes are going to be the same in the end, and this may be the fastest way to get this shape. For example, for this arena, if I want it all out of one piece really fast, really simple, I might do this, go top, and obviously I needed to make it bigger because it felt really small. So I'm going to even not scale it up, but I'm going to, if I scale it up inside of the verts, once I break it to an editable poly, no, editable spline, I mean, I'm so used to saying poly. Okay, if I take the verts and scale them out, then it keeps them correct. If I take the, keeps the model still thinking it's the right size. If I take the object and scale it out, it's not exactly correct, meaning that it's going to think that the object is a smaller size because it's not really defined by its verts, and these vert positions are changed. So, all right, so if I come back to here and I go to edge mode, actually, yeah, edge mode, and grab these and this and delete. I've got just this curve. This is kind of what we did in class. And then I'll take this one and I'll come back to edit poly, or create compound objects, and I'll say loft, and I'll say get shape, and click on this. And now I've got the shape that I want. I may want to turn up the interpolation this time, so I'll go to the modify panel, turn it up, why not? Okay, so now I've got a quarter of my arena. I got to change to an editable poly at this point, or even if I don't, but let's say I don't, let's leave it that way. And then I come here and I'll see this is the center point. I want to go to, I can mess with the path in here. If I open this up, I can see the path. And then if I look at what I'm looking at here, it's actually giving me control over the verts inside of the path. So it's like letting me go back in time. I'll pull this back a little bit. Well, that's unexpected. Oh, to shape path is what I meant. Huh. Oh, back to editable spline. Go back to vert. There we go. I'm like, why is it? Oh yeah, that's what it's doing. So I'll move it just a little bit in, and then I'll move this one just a little bit in, like that. And I go back to top menu, and I look at this. There's my arena, and then I can go back out of the loft shape, and symmetry, and say flip. And now I've got half of the arena with a gap in the middle. And then if I do another symmetry and say Y, and there you go. So you've got that. So I've got an arena, more or less, what I'm thinking of. And, you know, a really crappy one because of this huge tall thing, and these are uneven, all the 100 reasons why this doesn't work great. But it's there. Now, how would I build that in 3D? Well, probably not really easy. This may be the best way to do this if I was going to do it this way. Or I just do it, with the poly and then pull out the faces and get it to turn and dance. This may be the fastest solution. And like I said, there's sometimes these are the fastest solutions. It's just they don't jump in my head unless I'm thinking of things I need to make like this. So that's editable splines. You can do a lot of fun stuff with them. You can do a lot of nothing with them. You can spend your time, but again, I'm worried about you getting to the final point where it's the 3D object too. So if you want to use these to get to some of your 3D objects, have at it. You're more than welcome. And that's all we have.